A body is found aboard the Midnight Express, yet every passenger swears innocence. Welcome to Shadow Files. I am your host, Cale. This community is incredible. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Your voices make this journey unforgettable. The Orient Express, resplendent with polished brass and deep mahogany panels, sped steadily through the snow-clad night. Outside, a velvet darkness pressed against the windows, broken only by the ghostly glimmer of moonlight on endless drifts. Inside, the train was a cocoon of luxury, its air heavy with the scent of cigars, brandy, and expensive perfume. Silk curtains were drawn, velvet seats cradled their occupants, and the rhythmic murmur of wheels on steel had lulled many into a half-slumber. At the stroke of midnight, a scream shattered the calm. It was sharp, feminine, and filled with terror. Doors slid open along the corridor as startled passengers emerged, their voices low and urgent. The conductor hurried forward, his face pale beneath the brim of his cap, until all were drawn toward compartment number 7 of the Calais carriage. Inside, sprawled against the rich upholstery, lay the body of Monsieur Armand Bellamy, the French financier whose name was as infamous in certain circles as it was respected in others. His head lolled to one side in a grotesque angle, a blood stain darkening his fine silk waistcoat. Between his rigid fingers, he clutched a torn scrap of paper, its jagged edge suggesting violence rather than accident. The first to find her voice was Lady Margaret Whitcomb, her English vowels clipped and precise, though her hand trembled against a lace handkerchief. "Good heavens, he has been murdered," she cried, and the words seemed to hang in the heavy air like an accusation against them all. Around her gathered a strange company. Dr. Ernst Vogel, a German physician with sharp eyes and a severe expression, pressed forward to examine the scene, his voice practical but grim. Jacques Dubois, a young Parisian artist, hovered at the doorway, his cuffs still stained faintly with smudges of paint, his wide eyes filled with something between horror and fascination. Beside him stood Madame Céleste Arnaud, the celebrated opera singer whose beauty remained regal, though her dark gaze revealed nothing of her thoughts. Colonel Richard Harrington, retired from the British Army, bristled with indignation, his mustache twitching as though affronted by the very notion of murder aboard his train. They stood together, united by shock, yet divided by suspicion. Each face reflected unease, each pair of eyes seemed to search the others for some hidden guilt. Lady Margaret gave a brittle laugh, thin and hysterical. "We are trapped here," she whispered. "Trapped with a killer among us." The snow outside thickened, pressing against the windows in white silence, and the train gave a shudder as though unsettled by the secret it now carried. Yet, in a private compartment, only 2 doors. Away, a small man with a perfectly waxed mustache adjusted his cufflinks and listened carefully. Hercule Poirot, bound for London, had just been presented with a puzzle most sinister, one that would call upon the very finest exercise of his little grey cells. The scream drew them like filings to a magnet. Doors along the corridor yawned open, faces appeared and withdrew, whisper blossoming into agitation. The conductor fumbled with the compartment handle, looked once at the pale, accusing shape on the seat, and retreated a step as if the very air within might stain him. He was still stammering about waiting for the police when a small figure in a perfectly brushed suit slipped past him with a courtesy so unassailable that no one thought to object. Hercule Poirot, having listened long enough, had decided that the moment for order had come. "If you will permit," he said, and there was music in the sibilance of his French-accented English, "we will first ascertain if life, by any miracle, remains." He did not touch the body at once. The torn scrap trapped in the dead man's fingers interested him. So did the angle of the head and the way the lapels of the fine coat were slightly skewed, as though adjusted in haste or by another hand. He breathed in, cigar smoke certainly, but also something more delicate, a whisper of violet that did not seem consonant with a financier's toilette. On the seat opposite, the velvet showed a faint hollow where someone had recently sat. The cushion had not cooled entirely. Poirot lifted his eyes. "A doctor?" he asked softly. Dr. Ernst Vogel, already pushing forward, knelt with an economy of motion that suggested long practice. He placed 2 fingers at the throat, then at the wrist, and after a moment that was both brief and somehow respectful, he rose. "He is dead," Vogel said. "Stab wound here, under the ribs. The blade was narrow. The blood loss, rapid." He glanced around, perhaps calculating responsibility in the arrangement of faces. "We should not move him further." "Just so," Poirot murmured, "and we will touch nothing. You, Monsieur le Conducteur, you will close the corridor at both ends and ask all passengers from this carriage to assemble in the salon. No one leaves, no one enters. It is snowing. We are, as Milady has observed, most conveniently isolated." The conductor, relieved to have instructions that sounded like rescue, bobbed and hurried away. The little crowd shifted. Lady Margaret pressed her lace handkerchief to lips that were steadier now. Jacques Dubois stared at the blood with a painter's unholy fascination, as if the stain had a shade he might one day wish to reproduce. Madame Celeste Arnaud stood very straight, her dark eyes veiled, her fur collar immaculate despite the hurry in which she must have dressed. Colonel Harrington's mustache quivered with public principle. Poirot surveyed them as a maître d'hôtel surveys his tables, taking in, sorting, anticipating. "You heard the cry at midnight?" he asked no one and everyone. "Who was nearest?" "I was in my compartment," Lady Margaret said quickly. "I had just put aside my book. I went at once to the door. I saw only the conductor running past." "I was writing," said Dr. Vogel. "A case note. I heard the scream, waited only to fetch my bag, and came." "I was sketching," Dubois offered, flushing. "Not here, earlier, in the dining car. I had returned to my compartment. I heard the scream, of course. I thought perhaps, it is foolish, but I thought perhaps someone had seen a mouse." Madame Celeste's voice was low and beautifully trained. "I was asleep. The scream woke me. I came because the shock of it would travel through the carriage. I did not wish to lie and listen." The colonel cleared his throat. "I was walking, as it happens. A man of my age must— circulation, what? I had gone as far as the lavatory and was returning when the scream came. I was almost opposite this door." Poirot's gaze rested on him a heartbeat longer than politeness required. "And you saw no one enter or exit before you arrived?" "No one," Harrington said stoutly. "Door was ajar when I reached it, though." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci. We will fix the times precisely later." He stepped back into the compartment, his eyes darting like very quick birds. The window was latched, the brass shining with recent polish and a fringe of frost. The little folding table held a crystal carafe, half filled with water, and a single glass with a crescent of moisture low on the side, recently drained perhaps, but not by a man in his last seconds. A leather valise lay open on the rack, and within Poirot noted the orderly arrangement of shirts, the squared edges of documents. Order appealed to Bellamy as it did to himself, though the financier's order was of a more practical, less aesthetic kind. He looked again at the hand that clutched the paper scrap. With the care one gives a relic, he teased it free. The torn edge was jagged. On the surviving corner was printed a fragment of the railway's crest and, in pencil, the letters MIDN-. It could be the beginning of a word or an abbreviation. The hour had been midnight, a message written in extremis. The romantic conjecture displeased Poirot. Men in extremis seldom write cleverly, and they are very untidy indeed. "Conductor," he called when the man returned, breathless. "You will kindly tell me, was this carriage locked at the far end? And where is your colleague who attended Monsieur Bellamy at dinner?" Locked, monsieur, the conductor said. Only I have the key. My colleague Michel is on the Athens coach tonight. At dinner, I believe Monsieur Bellamy was served by Georges. And Georges is in the dining car, monsieur. Shall I fetch him? In the salon first, said Poirot. All of them in the salon. He turned to the others, hands set together as if in prayer, fingertips precisely aligned. If you will be so amiable, we shall go there together. We will sit. We will speak one at a time. We will reconstruct. It is comfortable, the salon, and I am a man who believes that the comfortable chair, loosens the tongue. They went like a small procession, the corridor's narrowness forcing an order upon them. As they passed, other doors opened. Curious faces, the discreet glance of a woman traveling alone, the frank stare of an American salesman with too much tie and too little tact, the blank interest of a priest. Poirot filed each impression away. Many things are not immediately important, but become so when other facts, like weights on a scale, begin to tip. In the salon, the lamps cast a mellow light on walnut and brass. The snow made the windows into frosted mirrors. The world beyond had ceased to exist. Poirot took a small table near the center and drew up a chair that suited him exactly. He placed the scrap of paper on the polished wood, the pencil side up. "We will begin with the facts that do not argue," he said. "Monsieur Bellamy is dead. A narrow blade has made this hole in him. The hour was very close to midnight. The door to his compartment stood ajar when we arrived. The window was latched. The adjoining door I have seen is bolted from Monsieur Bellamy's side. Therefore, our murderer entered by the corridor and departed by the corridor, unless he remains within." Poirot's eyes flicked, not theatrically, but with quiet certainty. "And to that, the conductor will attend by a search of compartments left unoccupied by their owners this evening." The conductor nodded vigorously and vanished to obey. The crowd made the soft sounds of people settling to listen. Poirot's gaze moved to each of the five who had first witnessed the scene. "You dined," he said. "Tell me of the dining." "I went late," Lady Margaret said. "At 10:30. There was stew and a poor salad, but the claret was decent. Monsieur Bellamy came in as I was finishing dessert. He nodded, though we are not acquainted. He took a table alone." "Did anyone join him?" Poirot asked. "I did not remain to see." Dr. Vogel spoke without invitation. "He passed my table," he said. "Ordered, I think, the tornadoes. There was an exchange with the waiter about the sauce. Bellamy was particular." "And with anyone else?" Vogel shook his head. He read a paper. He did not look sociable. Dubois had the air of a man reluctant to be noticed and discovered, to his embarrassment, that he was fascinating. "I made little drawings," he confessed. "People as they eat. Hands, mostly. I do not look at faces. It is considered rude. But I did see him, Bellamy. He drank water, not wine. He looked at his watch twice. He left before me." Madame Celeste's voice was velvet. "I ate in my compartment. A tray, a soup and a little. Chicken! My throat is my fortune. I do not take draughts of cold air in the dining car for the sake of appearances. And you, Colonel?" "Anchovy toast, soup, a cutlet. I take early dinners. Army habit." "Did any of you see Monsieur Bellamy speaking with someone in the corridor after dinner?" No one had. Poirot let the silence prolong just enough to make the negatives fit firmly into place. He picked up the scrap again and looked at it as if it were an old friend pretending to have a new face. "Midden," he murmured. "Midnight. A warning to himself, to be somewhere. A note to meet? Or perhaps it is not midden at all. Perhaps it is the beginning of another word. Midnight, yes, but it could be Maiden, a name. It could be a false clue, placed by a hand that knows how stories are told." Colonel Harrington bristled. "A dying message, man. It's plain as day. Chap hears someone at the door, realizes he's to be murdered. Scrawls the hour. meaning the murderer must be the one with no alibi at that time, which is to say, Poirot interrupted gently. We will not, as you English say, put the cart before the horse. We will first listen. The alibi, it is a delicate plant. One must see where it leans toward the sun. He turned to Lady Margaret. Milady, do you know Monsieur Bellamy? Only by reputation. She folded the handkerchief with brisk little movements. He speculated aggressively. Friends of mine were ruined by him and forgave him because he was clever about it. My late husband encountered him once at a club. He did not care for him. Ah, and yet you say it with coolness. Poirot's eyes warmed. You're not a woman to cry out unless you mean it. Your scream, what did you see at the first moment? The blood, she said simply. And the paper in his hand. It looked deliberate almost, as if he wanted us to see it. Perhaps he did, Poirot agreed. To Dr. Vogel, you are traveling for business, Doctor. For a conference in London, Vogel said. A paper on post-operative shock. And your bag. How quickly did you bring it? There was no time, I think, to fetch it from a far place. It is always at hand. I am methodical. To a fault, Poirot said softly, almost to himself, and moved on. Monsieur Dubois, you draw the hands when they eat. Did you draw the hands of Monsieur Bellamy? Dubois flushed again. Only a line, a suggestion. He had a ring, a signet ring. I like to capture the weight of such things. Poirot turned the ring on the dead man's finger later. In his mind, he had noted it without seeming to. He filed away the way Dubois said wait. Madame, he said to Celeste Arnaud, you were asleep. Forgive me. I observe your throat. It is swathed against draughts even now. It is most prudent, and yet your gloves are buttoned with care. Your hair confesses that a mirror has been consulted. You sleep, prepared to be seen. A glimmer of amusement touched the singer's mouth. I am a woman of the stage, Monsieur Poirot. If I must be seen unexpectedly, I prefer it not to be a tragedy. Touché. His smile was brief. You know Monsieur Bellamy. I have sung at parties where he has been present. He's the sort of man who moves chairs without asking the footman. Ah, said Poirot. He imposes his order on the order of others. It is an important character. And you, Colonel, he said last, you walk at night. Did you pass this door before the cry? Yes. I went as far as the lavatory, turned back. The carriage was quiet. I heard no voices. When the cry came, I was all ready now. Here. Poirot accepted this without comment, though he tilted his head as if to keep it balanced with something else on the other side. The conductor returned with Georges, the waiter, blinking in the unfamiliar glow of importance, and with him a thin, neat man from the staff, with a ledger under his arm. Monsieur Bellamy's ticket, his passport, his reservation, the neat man said, offering the book. And a note was left for him earlier in the evening. We deliver such things with discretion. We do not read them. A note, Poirot repeated. From whom? We do not know. But you remember to whom you gave it. To Georges. He put it on the gentleman's table in the dining car. Georges wrung his hands. Yes, monsieur. A small envelope, the railway crest. The gentleman did not open it at once. He put it in his pocket. Later, when I cleared, it was gone. Poirot's glance slid to the scrap upon the table, to the printed crest in its corner. We progress, he said mildly. And yet we learn. How little we know. He dismissed the staff with thanks that made them stand taller and turned the little scrap over once more. The pencil strokes were heavy and slanted, the way a man writes when the surface is unsteady. A train makes poor paper. The note brought to the table. Did anyone see who left it in the first place? He asked without looking up. Georges frowned. It was at the steward's station when I came for the coffee service. The envelope had the compartment number on it. I assumed it was left by a passenger with the steward. And the steward assumed the same of the waiter, Poirot said, not unkindly. I'm acquainted with this algebra. The snow hissed softly against the glass like silk. Somewhere, a door clicked. Poirot rose. I will now make the small inspection of the compartment of Monsieur Bellamy's neighbor, he said. Not to pry, oh no, but to see with the eyes what men forget to tell with the tongue. Colonel Harrington bristled again. Do you suspect the neighbor, then? I suspect, said Poirot gently, what the circumstance suggests. We have a message of midnight, sir. We have a door that stands ajar. We have a gentleman who drinks water and keeps appointments by his watch. We have also, he added, looking at the singer with a slight bow, a perfume of violets where there should be only tobacco and money. We will follow each thread where it leads, one at a time with the patience. Come, my friends. We go slowly, and we arrive. They rose reluctantly, compelled by his certainty. In the corridor the air was cooler, edged with coal and winter. Poirot paused outside compartment number 8, the neighbor to the dead man's. The bolt on Bellamy's side was shot. He had seen that already. He knocked. There was no answer. The conductor produced a key with ceremony and a protest about privacy, which Poirot soothed away with a smile. Within, the compartment was neat, impersonal. A rug lay slightly askew as if a foot had caught it. On the little table there was a railway envelope, empty, its flap torn, not with the jag of haste, but with the slow care of a person who dislikes ragged edges. In the ashtray lay the stub of a cigarette with an Egyptian mouthpiece, and beside it a match burned down to a blister where a finger had pinched it too late. Poirot stood very still, and then, with the most delicate distaste, straightened the rug with the toe of his shoe. Order, he said softly. It is insulted, and when order is insulted, murder is near. He did not explain, not yet. He only looked once more at the empty envelope, and then back toward the salon where 5 faces waited with the strenuous anger of the innocent and the guilty alike. The train rolled on, slow and implacable through the whitening world, and midnight, already an hour old, seemed to hover still in the air as if the clock had caught on something and refused, for the moment, to move. The corridor smelled faintly of coal smoke and polish, the old wood creaking as the train pressed its way through snow that seemed determined to swallow it whole. Poirot remained standing in the little compartment adjoining that of the dead man. His eyes lingered on the empty envelope and the cigarette with its Egyptian mouthpiece. He touched nothing, not with the tips of his immaculate fingers, nor even with his gloved hand. Instead, he let his gaze travel slowly over the surfaces of the place, as though he were conversing with them silently. When at last he turned back to the waiting conductor and the nervous faces gathered at the door, he had the air of a man who had added a new column of figures to a ledger that only he could see. Close this door, he said gently. We have enough from here. The conductor obeyed with relief, fumbling the key. Poirot inclined his head toward the salon. We will return. It is not the compartments that tell the truth, my friends. It is the people who sit in them. They went back down the corridor like a small procession returning from a chapel. The storm pressed against the windows, lending the scene the hush of a world withdrawn. In the salon, the lamps glowed warmly, but the atmosphere was tense, as if the air itself weighed heavily on the passengers. Poirot resumed his chosen chair with its little table and settled himself as though he were to take tea rather than direct the unraveling of a murder. His fingertips pressed together. His eyes traveled slowly from face to face. I've examined what is next to the chamber of Monsieur Bellamy, he began. There we find an empty envelope of the railway, torn with neatness. We find also the cigarette of Egyptian tobacco. Neither of these things should be there without an owner who will claim them. It will interest me very much to hear whose they may be. Lady Margaret looked puzzled. Surely, monsieur, many people smoke such cigarettes. Ah, Poirot lifted a finger. Not many in this carriage. The mouthpiece, it is not common. I have noted already the smoke that clings to our colonel. Ah, He is faithful to the pipe. The doctor, he is too strict to allow himself indulgences of that sort. Our young artist, he stains with charcoal, not with tobacco. And you, madame, he glanced toward Celeste Arnaud, your voice would not forgive the roughness of these little poisons. Madame Celeste inclined her head, a wry curve at her lips. You observe too much, monsieur. I observe what is there. To observe too much, it is impossible. Poirot allowed himself a small smile before continuing. The cigarette waits for its owner. But let us not run. Let us walk. We begin at the beginning. Each of you will tell me not only where you were at midnight, but also what you know of Monsieur Bellamy. For to murder a man, one must know him, even if only by the shadow he casts. Dr. Vogel, stiff in his dark coat, folded his hands. I know of him professionally, in the sense that financiers sometimes sponsor hospitals or clinics. He had interests in such matters, though not from altruism. He looked for profit, even in medicine. I've read of his dealings. I cannot admire them. Poirot regarded him thoughtfully. But you knew him not personally. No, monsieur, not beyond what any man of my education might know. And yet you were very prompt in your attention, Poirot said mildly. Your bag was ready. I'm always ready, Vogel replied, the lines around his mouth deepening. It is the duty of a physician. Très bien. Poirot's gaze moved to Lady Margaret. She sat composed, but her handkerchief lay crushed in her lap, a small testimony to her strain. My husband, she said slowly, spoke of him years ago. Bellamy speculated in metals and foreign bonds. He had a talent for turning the misfortunes of others into gold for himself. It was his charm that he did so without apology, and men respected him for it. I confess, monsieur, I disliked him, but my dislike does not extend to murder. Poirot bowed slightly. Your candor, it is admirable. To dislike, bah, that is human. To act, that is something else. We shall see. He turned, his gaze upon Dubois, who shifted under it like a schoolboy caught at mischief. The young painter's fingers toyed with a small sketchbook he had brought to the salon, though its pages remained firmly shut. I know little, Dubois said. I saw him only tonight in the dining car. I watched his hands as he cut his meat. They were strong, but nervous. He looked at his watch, always at his watch. I thought perhaps he waited for something. Someone. Très intéressant, Poirot murmured. And you notice the small things. This is good. Sometimes the artist, he sees what the detective must confirm. At last Poirot's eyes settled upon Madame Celeste Arnaud. She met them with the calm of one accustomed to scrutiny, her expression revealing nothing. I've sung in Paris salons where such men come and go, she said. Monsieur Bellamy admired beauty, but not in the way that pleases a woman. For him it was an acquisition, a decoration. He asked once to be introduced to me. I declined. There is nothing more. And yet, Poirot said softly, in his compartment there clings the perfume of violets. For the first time her mask shifted, her lashes lowered, just a fraction too late to be natural. You accuse me of visiting him. I accuse no one, Poirot said, spreading his hands. I state only what I perceive. Perfume does not lie, madame, but it may mislead if another has borrowed it. The colonel shifted impatiently in his chair. This is all very fine, but what we want is plain speaking. Who killed the man, and how do we put them in irons? That's the question. Poirot's mustache twitched in delicate reproof. Mon colonel, it is exactly this that we must not do. Jump to the finish when the dance has scarcely begun. Murder is a question of psychology, of the small contradictions in what we say and what we do. Consider, for example, this note. He lifted the torn scrap. Midden. It may mean midnight, or it may mean something else entirely. But tell me, who among you received from Monsieur Bellamy any word, any hint that he had an appointment at this hour? Silence stretched. Then Lady Margaret spoke, hesitantly. I thought, No, it may be nothing, but when he entered the dining car, he looked directly at me for the briefest instant. It was not a greeting. No nod, no smile. More like a check, as though to confirm that I was present. Dubois gave a nervous laugh. Perhaps he looked at me. I thought he studied me once, though I was at another table. I dismissed it. Poirot leaned forward. So, we have a man who consults his watch, who drinks water, not wine, who receives a note, and who is found dead at the hour the note suggests. He expects something, he waits, and then he dies. Voila. What is missing? Only who he waits for. The storm rattled faintly at the glass. Poirot allowed the silence to swell, pressing his listeners inward, compelling them to feel the weight of what had been said. Then he sat back. There is also, he continued quietly, the question of motive. Monsieur Bellamy was not loved, but to kill, one must pass from dislike to necessity. What necessity had our murderer? Colonel Harrington struck the arm of his chair with a fist. Blackmail, that's what it is. Fellows like Bellamy, they always dabble in papers better left unexamined. If you ask me, he held something over one of us. Perhaps, Poirot said calmly. Perhaps not. But it is true he dealt in secrets. We must find what secret traveled with him tonight. He rose, and all eyes followed him. His hand rested lightly on the back of the chair. Messieurs, dames, we have spoken. But words are only the beginning. Now we must observe. I will ask each of you, at the hour tomorrow morning when the snow permits, to permit me a look at your compartments. Meanwhile, none will leave this carriage. Are you suggesting we are all suspects? Lady Margaret demanded. Poirot's eyes twinkled without mirth. Mais oui, madame. Until the little grey cells have spoken, everyone is a suspect. Even Hercule Poirot himself. The tension broke with uneasy laughter, but it was laughter tinged with fear. Poirot let it ripple through them before lifting a hand for quiet. There is one more thing, he said. This envelope. It was given to the waiter, Georges, without knowledge of who placed it. But such things are never entirely invisible. Someone on this train saw it or knows who delivered it. I will find that person, and when I do, the murderer will begin to tremble. He reseated himself and closed his eyes briefly, as though shutting out the bustle of the room. The hum of the train seemed louder, the storm more insistent. Each passenger looked at the other, and in each face was the same silent question, who among us has killed? Poirot opened his eyes again and smiled, a small and unreadable smile. We will take coffee, he said. Murder is exhausting, but coffee is always precise, and precision, mes amis, is the soul of detection. The conductor hurried to obey, grateful for something ordinary to do, while the passengers shifted in their seats, restless under Poirot's watchful gaze. The night pressed on, the snow thickened, and somewhere in the shadows of that opulent train, the truth lay waiting to be uncovered. And Poirot, with infinite patience, prepared to coax it into the light. The night seemed longer than the hours it contained. The storm pressed more fiercely against the carriage, burying the tracks behind them as if to erase the memory of what had passed. In the salon, the little group lingered over their coffee. No one drank much. Cups cooled untouched on saucers. All waited for the small man with the impeccable moustache to pronounce some judgment, some revelation that would pierce the gloom. But Poirot did not hurry. He savored his coffee with the same deliberation with which he tied his cravat. Each morning, to rush in his philosophy was to miss the tiny clue that fluttered past like a moth in lamplight. He allowed the silence to grow, then cut it delicately. My friends, he said at last, we come now to the very dangerous stage. A murder, it is like a flower. At first, the bud, closed, secret. We open it petal by petal. At the end, there is the bloom entire, and its perfume, whether of roses or of poison, fills the air. Tonight, we begin to see the first petals. Lady Margaret shifted in her chair. "And what do these petals show, monsieur?" "That a man expected something at midnight, that he received a note, that he died with a message half-written. That, mesdames et messieurs, is the outline. Into this outline we must paint the color, and already there is one shade more vivid than the rest." The company stirred uneasily. Poirot's gaze rested lightly upon Colonel Richard Harrington. "You, mon colonel, were in the corridor." "You alone." The colonel stiffened. His mustache quivered as though it were another man's lips forming words of protest. "Pure chance, Poirot. I take a walk at night. Old habit, as I told you." "Precisely," said Poirot. "And yet, at such a moment, when the scream is heard, you're standing at the very door. You tell us the door was ajar, yet it is certain when I examined it later it was closed. You saw it open, or you opened it yourself?" "Dash it all, man, I've nothing to hide. I tried the handle. When I heard the cry, I thought someone fainted perhaps. I opened it and saw, that's all." "Ah, mais non, not all." Poirot's tone remained courteous, but it had the firmness of steel beneath silk. "Consider, the waiter brings a note to the table. Bellamy pockets it. Later he waits, looks at his watch. He expects a visitor. The door's ajar. And who is in the corridor but a man of the army, trained to act, quick in decision? You enter. The blade, it is narrow, the thrust efficient. Such things are known to a soldier. Voilà." Gasps followed his words. Lady Margaret clutched her handkerchief tighter, while Dubois stared with morbid fascination at the colonel, as if sketching him with his eyes. Madame Celeste alone remained still, her gaze like dark velvet upon Poirot. Harrington half rose, indignation written on every line of his face. "You accuse me, of butchery in cold blood. Outrageous." Poirot's hands lifted in pacification. "I accuse no one, monsieur. I merely place before you the facts. Others they may accuse." I wait. The little grey cells must be exact. But permit me to note, your presence at that very moment, it is convenient. Too convenient." The colonel sank back, crimson blotches rising on his cheeks. "It is the curse of chance. If only I had stayed in my compartment." "Perhaps," Poirot said softly. "Or perhaps not." The atmosphere had shifted. Suspicion coiled around Harrington like smoke. Dubois whispered to Utatsinsu, Lady Margaret, who nodded stiffly, her eyes darting toward the colonel. Dr. Vogel polished his spectacles with an air of grim certainty, as though in the colonel's guilt he had already diagnosed the illness and prescribed the cure. Only Madame Celeste lifted her chin and spoke. "Colonel Harrington may be brusque, but he is no murderer." Her voice was calm, assured, with the weight of conviction that drew every eye. Poirot watched her as one watches a queen on a chessboard, with respect, but also with calculation. "Perhaps you are right, madame," he said. "Perhaps. But let us examine further. Colonel, you said you heard no voices in the corridor before the cry." "None. And yet the cushion opposite Bellamy in his compartment bore the impression of a weight. Someone sat there not long before. The man did not kill himself, therefore another was present." "Did you see such a person leave?" "No." Harrington's voice was firm. Poirot inclined his head. "So, either the person left by magic, or he left before you arrived. In that case, monsieur, you could not have opened the door at the first sound of the cry. You must have delayed." The colonel opened his mouth, shut it again. His mustache twitched helplessly. Poirot sat back, satisfied to let suspicion bloom. The seed was planted, and he knew well that it would grow in the minds of the others, overshadowing other possibilities. He let them stew in silence for several minutes before he spoke again, his tone lighter, almost playful. "My friends, you see how easy it is to leap upon the first man who seems guilty. It is, how do you say, the reflex. But I tell you, beware. The truth is rarely the first to present itself. In crime, as in art, there are false lines drawn to mislead the eye. Dubois stirred uneasily, as though the remark had been meant for him. Poirot's eyes flickered toward him but passed on, apparently innocent. He rose then, and with a bow, excused himself. "I must now make the small promenade. It clears the head, n'est-ce pas? Remain here, if you will. Speak softly. Listen more. One learns much from silence." The salon buzzed when he left. Voices rose and fell. Speculation spun itself in circles. Colonel Harrington defended himself hotly, growing more vehement with each denial. The others listened, but did not wholly believe. Poirot walked the corridor slowly, his eyes thoughtful, his ears pricked for the smallest sound behind closed doors. At the end of the carriage he paused, looked out upon the snow. The flakes beat against the glass in endless procession, each unique, each transient. He thought of the scrap of paper, of the violets in the financier's compartment, of the Egyptian cigarette. A puzzle, yes, but the pieces did not yet fit. He turned back, retracing his steps. Near Bellamy's compartment, he stopped. The conductor had stationed himself there, stiff as a sentry. "No one has entered?" Poirot asked. "No one, monsieur. Only you earlier." "Très bien." Poirot stood still, listening. There was no sound but the hum of the train. Yet something teased at the edges of his perception, a discordant note in the symphony of order. He opened the door once more. The body lay as before. The blood darkened further. Poirot studied it, but not with the eyes of the physician. He studied the line of the coat, the set of the hands, the way the scrap of paper had been clutched. He bent close, scrutinizing the ink of the initials upon Bellamy's cuff. Faded slightly on one side, as though smudged by sweat or by another's touch. "Ah," Poirot whispered. "It becomes clearer. A man expects a meeting. He writes a note or receives one. He waits. He dies. But why, always, do they forget the psychology? Murder, it is not the act. It is the mind that commits it, and the mind, it cannot help but betray itself." He closed the door gently and returned to the salon. The passengers looked up, tense, expectant. Poirot resumed his chair, folded his hands once more. "My friends," he said, "we will retire soon. It has been a long night, and the dawn, it will bring perhaps rescue from the snow. But I warn you, do not sleep too soundly, for one among you carries a burden heavy enough to crush the conscience. And when conscience presses, sometimes it makes a noise. Listen well in the night, and you may hear it." The words settled over them like the snow outside, soft, inexorable, concealing all beneath their weight. Poirot smiled faintly. He had planted another seed. Whether it bore fruit in confession or in another desperate act remained to be seen. The train rolled on into the storm. Inside, the circle tightened, suspicion twisting like ivy around the colonel. Yet Poirot, behind the sparkle of his eyes, knew already that this suspicion was a mask. The true face of murder lay elsewhere, waiting to be revealed at the proper hour. And so the flower of crime opened another petal, its scent filling the air with dread. The snow had muffled the outside world into silence. The Orient Express became a universe of its own, sealed in brass, mahogany, velvet, and fear. Though the salon was warm with lamps and the smell of coffee, the air inside was taut, each passenger listening for a note of accusation in every creak of the train. Poirot sat motionless in his chosen chair, his fingertips still joined, his eyes half closed as if in meditation. Only the subtle twitch of his mustache betrayed the activity of the little grey cells within. Colonel Harrington had returned to his seat after much protest, but his cheeks still glowed with fury. Dubois shifted restlessly beside him, turning his sketchbook over in his hands, too nervous to draw. Lady Margaret had withdrawn into a fragile quietness, her lips pressed thin as if any word might betray more than she wished. Madame Celeste, still composed, leaned back gracefully, her eyes half-lidded, and Dr. Vogel kept watch over them all with a severity that might have been mistaken for authority. Poirot spoke at last, his tone conversational, almost gentle. It is always so, you know. The murderer, he hides behind the appearance of another. He allows suspicion to fall where it is convenient. Already you begin to believe the colonel guilty. It is natural. He was near. He is brusque. He admits to opening the door. Voilà, but beware, mes amis. This is precisely what a clever murderer desires. The colonel barked a laugh. So you don't believe it yourself, eh? I should hope not. Damned insulting business. Poirot's eyes twinkled. I believe nothing yet, mon colonel. I wait. I watch. The truth, she reveals herself when the time is ripe. Until then, one listens, and one plays a little game. A game? Dubois asked uncertainly. Poirot spread his hands. A game of psychology. Permit me. He leaned forward, addressing them as though they were pupils in a classroom. When a crime is committed, the guilty man or woman seeks to hide their nature. They try to arrange the face, the voice, the story, but the nature, it escapes. It escapes in the contradiction, in the detail too well polished, in the moment when the mask slips. You see, it is not the big lie that betrays. It is the small inconsistency. Lady Margaret shifted uneasily. And you mean to make us contradict ourselves, monsieur? Not I, madame. You will do so yourselves. I merely provide the opportunity. He rose and moved toward the little table by the window. The scrap of paper still lay there. He picked it up delicately, turning it so the pencil marks caught the light. Observe this message, he said. It is written in haste, yes. But see, you have the letters MIDN-. Now I put the question, what does it mean? The colonel snorted. Midnight, obviously. Dying man scrawls the time. Obviously, Poirot repeated softly. Perhaps. But dying men, they seldom take such trouble. Why not write the name of the murderer, eh? Or simply one word, help? No, it is too theatrical. And what is theatrical? He glanced toward Madame Celeste with a courteous bow. Is often false. Her lips curved faintly, but her eyes did not waver. Poirot continued, letting his words drift like bait upon the water. Suppose instead it is the beginning of a name, Maiden, Midland, Midwinter, who knows? Suppose it is even the beginning of a French word, midi, the noon. Why then, our interpretation changes entirely. Lady Margaret frowned. But surely it must have been meant for us to see. Otherwise, why leave it? Just so, said Poirot. And that, madame, is the problem. A true dying message is almost always hidden, difficult, not made to be seen. But this one, it is displayed. Too neat, too ready. Which tells me... He paused, letting the silence stretch until their eyes clung to him. Which tells me that perhaps it was not written by the dying man at all. A ripple of shock passed among them. Dubois' fingers clenched his sketchbook. The colonel muttered something under his breath. Madame Celeste at last allowed her eyes to widen, though only a fraction. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. Imagine, mes amis. The murderer kills. He wishes to throw suspicion. He takes the paper. He writes quickly, Midden. He places it in the hand of the victim, forcing the fingers to curl about it. Voilà, a clue is born, but a false one. Dr. Vogel leaned forward abruptly. Absurd. The rigor of the hand would prevent it. The fingers would not close. Poirot smiled. At once, doctor, you contradict yourself. You who told us that death was rapid, who pointed to the blood loss, who said life ebbed quickly. Such a man could yet have been arranged before the rigor began. You see, already the contradictions appear. Vogel's mouth snapped shut. His spectacles flashed in the light as he polished them furiously. Poirot let the silence grow again. He looked from face to face, savoring the subtle cracks in their composure. Then he played his second card. "There is also," he said, "the matter of the perfume. Violets, delicate, unmistakable. It hung about the compartment of Monsieur Bellamy. Why? Who will tell me?" No one spoke. Poirot's eyes turned deliberately to Madame Celeste. She did not flinch, but the faintest smile lingered at her lips, as if amused by the scrutiny. "Do you deny, madame, that it was yours?" "Not at all," she replied smoothly. "It may be. Many women favor violets." "May we? And yet it clings strongly, as though someone had lingered there. Not a mere passing in the corridor. No, a presence in the compartment." She shrugged, the movement graceful, dismissive. "Then I confess, Monsieur Poirot, I have passed by the door. Perhaps the air followed me." "Perhaps." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "But a financier such as Bellamy, he is not the man to invite perfume into his chamber without reason. And you, madame, are not the woman to bestow your presence without purpose. You declined his introductions in Paris. Why would you visit him now at midnight?" Her smile deepened, yet her eyes glittered. "And why, monsieur, do you assume I did?" Poirot spread his hands. "I assume nothing. I ask only. But already, you see, the false trail is laid. Violets say, 'It is the singer.' The midnight note says, 'It is the colonel.' The contradictions, they multiply, and somewhere, within them, the truth hides." He reseated himself, his mustache twitching in satisfaction. Now he changed tactics, the game within the game. He spoke of trifles, of coffee, of travel, of the storm that stranded them. He asked Dubois about his art, Lady Margaret about her book, Vogel about his patients, the colonel about his regiment, Celeste about her arias. Each replied, thinking themselves relieved. Yet Poirot watched them with eyes that missed nothing. He observed how Dubois avoided mentioning his sketches of Bellamy's hands, how Lady Margaret stumbled slightly when asked the title of her book as though inventing it, how Vogel's insistence on punctuality rang a little too polished, how the colonel bristled even at innocent questions, how Celeste answered with charm but withheld detail. It was all theatre, and Poirot was the director, waiting for one misplaced line to reveal the true author of the play. At length he rose. "Mes amis, it is late. You will return to your compartments. The snow will hold us until morning. We are prisoners of circumstance. But remember this. A murderer also lies awake. He fears, he trembles, he plots his next move. I will be listening." The passengers dispersed reluctantly. Poirot watched them go, noting every gesture. Lady Margaret hurried, her shoulders stiff. Dubois lingered, glancing nervously at the colonel before disappearing. Vogel walked with mechanical precision. Celeste glided, every step composed. Harrington strode heavily, muttering under his breath. When they were gone, Poirot stood alone in the salon, gazing at the scrap of paper one last time. He tucked it carefully into his pocket. Then, with the air of a man who has set the stage perfectly for his drama, he extinguished the lamps and retired to his compartment. The train rolled on through the snow, its heart beating in iron and steam. And somewhere, within the darkened carriages, the guilty soul lay awake, wondering if Hercule Poirot had already seen through the mask. He had. But Poirot, master of psychology, would not reveal it yet. The game must be played to its end. The guilty must condemn themselves. And so the night deepened, and the trap was set. The train pressed on through the storm, snow striking the windows with soft violence, the world outside obliterated into whiteness. Inside, silence had spread like frost. One by one, the passengers had retreated to their compartments, each to lie awake in the dark with their thoughts. Only Poirot, in his neat berth, remained serenely composed, the order of his possessions unbroken, slippers precisely aligned, dressing gown folded with exact symmetry, watch ticking softly by his pillow. But though his body rested, his mind did not sleep. He had seen too much, and he knew that the murderer, too, would not sleep. A guilty conscience does not allow slumber. It demands action, and action, Poirot reflected, would come. It came sooner than even he expected. At 3:30 in the morning, the train jolted sharply as though striking against an unseen hand of the storm. The lamps flickered, the rhythm of the wheels slowed. Poirot sat up, listening. There was a noise in the corridor. Hurried footsteps, a muffled cry. He slipped into his slippers, wrapped his robe about him, and opened his door. The conductor came running, his face pale, his cap askew. "Monsieur Poirot, there has been another—" He broke off, gesturing desperately. Poirot followed. A cluster of passengers had gathered near the far end of the carriage. Lady Margaret stood among them, her hair dishevelled, her hand pressed to her mouth. Dubois was white as a sheet, clutching his sketchbook as if it were a shield. The colonel looked grim, Doctor. Vogel stern, Madame Celeste calm in her flowing night-robe, her dark hair unbound. On the floor before them lay Georges, the young waiter. His body was crumpled in the corridor, one hand stretched out as though to grasp something just beyond reach. His eyes were open, staring in frozen terror. Around his throat a mark was visible. Fingers, strong and merciless, had strangled the life from him. Lady Margaret gasped. "Another! In God's name, another murder!" The colonel bent down, examined briefly, then straightened. Strangled. No weapon, just bare hands. The villain must be desperate. Poirot knelt. His gaze was not on the wound, but on the details others overlooked. The scuff of a shoe on the polished floor, the faint smell of tobacco clinging to the waiter's jacket, the position of his arm. His fingertips hovered above the dead man's hand. Something lay there, a fragment of paper, crumpled. Poirot teased it free, unfolding it with infinite care. It was a note, written hastily in pencil. He saw. That was all. 2 words, incomplete. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He rose slowly, turning to the others. "Messieurs, dames, it appears Monsieur Georges saw something he should not, and for this knowledge he is silenced." Dubois whispered hoarsely, "But he must have seen the murderer of Bellamy." "Exactly," Poirot said softly. "And now he is dead. We must ask, who feared his knowledge?" The suspicion that had previously clung to the colonel now shifted, invisible but palpable, settling on each in turn. Lady Margaret backed against the wall, trembling. Dr. Vogel muttered under his breath in German, his face drawn. Celeste's expression did not change, though her eyes gleamed strangely in the dim light. Poirot motioned to the conductor. "Take care of the body. Place it in an empty compartment and close the door. We will not disturb him further tonight." When this was done, Poirot ushered the passengers back to the salon, though it was the hour when sleep should have reigned. The lamps glowed again. The snow pressed on the windows with ghostly persistence. The passengers sat, exhausted, fearful, resentful. Poirot remained standing. His presence filled the room, calm but inexorable. "You see now," he said, "the net tightens. At first, it was only one man, Bellamy, who was killed. That might have been revenge, necessity, some private quarrel. But now a second victim, one who is not important, who has no enemies. Georges is killed because he saw, which means, my friends, that the murderer is among us still, and he fears. He fears that Georges could betray him. Therefore, he kills again." A silence fell. Poirot let it grow, heavy as stone. The colonel broke it. "Then one of us here, tonight, crept into the corridor and strangled that poor fellow. Good God, while we were sleeping." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Perhaps while you were sleeping, Colonel, or perhaps while you pretended." The colonel flushed angrily, but Poirot moved on, his gaze alighting on Lady Margaret. "You screamed when you saw the first body, but tonight, when Georges fell, you were already there." "How so?" she started. I could not sleep. I heard noises in the corridor. I opened my door. That is all. Poirot regarded her. And you saw whom? No one. Only Georges running past. Running from what? Poirot asked softly. She faltered. I do not know. He let her words hang, then turned to Dubois. And you, monsieur, why carry your sketchbook even in the night? To protect yourself? Or to hide something? Dubois flushed scarlet. I sketch always. It is habit. It comforts me. Perhaps. Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes sharp. He turned next to Madame Celeste. And you, madame, are most composed. Too composed, perhaps. Does murder disturb you so little? Her lips curved. On the stage, monsieur, I have died 100 deaths. It is less dramatic in truth. What good is hysteria? It solves nothing. True, Poirot said softly. But serenity, too, can be a mask. At last, his eyes rested on Dr. Vogel. And you, Doctor, you speak of precision, of order. Yet you were the first to pronounce Bellamy dead, to declare the wound mortal. Tonight again, you step forward to declare the method. You are always ready. Is that convenience or preparation? Vogel's mouth tightened. You imply too much, monsieur. I am a physician. My duty compels me. Should I stand idle? Duty, Poirot murmured. Yes, but sometimes duty is a shield for something else. He let the words fall, then seated himself at last. He placed the new scrap of paper on the table beside Bellamy's fragment. Midden. And he saw 2 messages. One perhaps false, one perhaps true. Together they tell us only this, that the killer is clumsy in his cleverness. He plants too much. The passengers shifted, restless, but Poirot's calm only deepened. Tomorrow, when the snow clears, the police will come. But I warn you, before they arrive, the murderer may try again. He fears exposure. He trembles, and when fear trembles, it strikes. He leaned back, closing his eyes, as though the matter were settled. Yet within, his little grey cells worked tirelessly, knitting together the contradictions, the violets, the soldier's presence, the doctor's readiness, the artist's watchfulness, the widow's scream. The pieces did not yet form a complete picture, but the outline was emerging, faint but inevitable. Somewhere in the room, the murderer sat. Poirot knew that in the hours to come, the guilty would betray themselves, not by blood or blade, but by the smallest slip of the mind. And when they did, Hercule Poirot would be waiting. The train groaned, the storm raged, and dawn crept slowly toward them, bearing with it both judgment and revelation. The snowstorm weakened with the first light of dawn, though the train still stood marooned upon the white-blanketed tracks. Pale shafts of light forced their way through the frosted windows, washing the salon in a cold, weary glow. The passengers had gathered again, drawn less by choice than by fear. None dared remain alone in their compartments. They had endured a sleepless night in one another's company, watching, listening, suspecting. Even the luxury of the Orient Express could not disguise the staleness of nerves stretched too thin. Poirot entered quietly, as though he had never left. His suit was immaculate, his moustache precisely waxed, his manner unhurried. He settled into his accustomed chair and regarded the group with eyes that missed nothing. "Messieurs, dames," he said, "we approach the moment when the snow will relent, when the train may continue and the police may come. But I tell you this, before they arrive, we shall have our truth. Hercule Poirot does not leave matters for others to untangle. Already the shape of the thing becomes clear. We have only to confirm." The colonel bristled. "Then out with it, man. We've been trapped here with suspicion in the air thick enough to choke us. Who did it? Who throttled that poor waiter? And who stuck the knife in Bellamy?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, but his voice was cool. "Patience, mon colonel. A fine soup requires time to simmer. We must first taste the ingredients." Lady Margaret's fingers clutched her handkerchief, the lace now ragged from use. "But, monsieur, we are all at risk if the murderer strikes again." "He will," Poirot said simply. "If pressed, he will strike. That is why we must act quickly." He reached into his pocket and laid 2 scraps of paper on the table. Bellamy's Meaden and Georges. He saw. He let them sit between himself and the passengers like relics on an altar. 2 messages, he said. One perhaps genuine, one perhaps false. One written by a man dying, the other by a man desperate. They tell us this: the killer is among us. He fears exposure. He is clever, but too clever. He leaves behind contradictions, and contradictions, mes amis, are the fingerprints of the mind. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes fixing upon Dubois, the artist. "Monsieur, may I see your sketchbook?" Dubois started. "My sketchbook? Why?" "Because you carried it last night as though it were a shield," Poirot said softly. "Because you avoided showing it to me when I asked about your drawings. And because an artist's book, it is his soul. Show us." Dubois hesitated, his knuckles whitening around the little book. The other stared, waiting. At last, with a trembling sigh, he passed it to Poirot. Poirot opened it with care, turning the pages slowly. There were quick sketches of passengers in the dining car, a curve of Lady Margaret's hand as she lifted her wine-glass, the outline of the Colonel's heavy boots, the doctor's spectacles flashing in lamplight. Then, Bellamy, a sharp study of his hands, strong and restless, and beside it, another sketch. A profile, drawn furtively, of Bellamy leaning across the table, speaking to someone whose face was left blank. Only the outline of a woman's hair and the faint suggestion of a fur collar had been traced. Poirot closed the book gently. "Voilà. You see, my friends? The young artist has drawn more than he realized. He has seen Bellamy in conversation with a woman." "Which woman?" Dubois flushed. I don't know. I drew only what I glimpsed. It may have been nothing." "But you saw," Poirot said. "You saw him lean close, speak low. You saw the fur collar. Madame Celeste wears fur, does she not?" The singer's eyes glittered, but she did not look away. "Many women wear fur, monsieur." "True, but not many sat near Bellamy that night." The Colonel slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. "There, then. She was with him. That perfume in his compartment. It was hers." Poirot raised a hand. "Calm, mon colonel. We do not leap to conclusions. We observe. Madame, you deny you spoke with him?" Celeste's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I do not deny that he addressed me. He begged for a moment of my time. I agreed, for courtesy's sake. But nothing more. A few words in the corridor, that was all." Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet his compartment reeked of violets. "He admired my perfume," she said coolly. "He asked its name. Perhaps the scent lingered. Perhaps." Poirot's mustache twitched. "But let us ask ourselves, what did he want? Why seek you out, madame, so urgently, so near midnight?" Celeste lifted her chin. "He wanted money. He said he had information, something he wished to sell. I refused him. I told him I was not a banker nor a fool. That is all." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. "Information?" Lady Margaret whispered. "What kind of information?" Celeste's dark eyes were steady. "He did not say, only that it would interest me greatly, and that if I did not buy it, another would." Poirot leaned back. "Ah, voilà the connection. Bellamy had secrets to sell. Secrets are a dangerous currency. They buy enemies." Dr. Vogel spoke sharply, "And so he tried to sell one to Madame. But to whom else?" Poirot smiled thinly. "That, doctor, is the heart of the matter. Bellamy carried something. Documents, perhaps. Letters, perhaps. Something that touched one among us. Georges, the waiter, delivered the note to him. Yes, but he also saw who gave it. And for this knowledge, Georges was killed, the colonel muttered darkly. Then the person who gave that note, he or she, is the murderer. Just so, Poirot said, and we must discover who. He rose suddenly, small yet commanding. I will search Bellamy's valise again. There is order there, the order of a man who feared disorder, and when order is disturbed, it tells me much. He led them once more to the dead man's compartment. The conductor unlocked the door. The body still lay where it had fallen, now shrouded respectfully with a blanket. Poirot moved to the valise, examining each shirt, each document. Then he stopped. A folder lay neatly beneath the clothing, its edges perfectly aligned. Poirot opened it. Inside were papers, contracts, correspondence, and a letter with a seal broken. He read silently, his brows lifting. Then he closed the folder, turned to the passengers gathered behind him, and spoke. Messieurs, dames, Bellamy indeed had secrets. This letter, addressed to a government official, concerns financial speculation in hospitals. Fraud, large-scale, international. Names are mentioned. Among them, one we know very well. His eyes fell upon Dr. Vogel. The physician's face went ashen. You lie, he whispered. Poirot's voice was quiet, inexorable. I do not lie. Bellamy sought to sell this secret. To Madame, perhaps, he hinted. To others, perhaps he offered more. But one thing is certain. You, doctor, are named, and Georges, poor Georges, may have seen you slip the note into Bellamy's hand. A shocked silence followed. Dr. Vogel's hands clenched into fists. This is slander. I'm a man of science, not of fraud. Poirot bowed slightly. Perhaps. And yet Bellamy is dead. Georges is dead. The papers lie here. And you, doctor, are caught in the middle. The group stared at Vogel. The colonel's eyes blazed. Lady Margaret gasped. Dubois shrank back. Madame Celeste alone looked unsurprised. Poirot let the weight of suspicion shift, pressing down upon the doctor. He did not yet declare guilt, for that was not his way. Instead, he planted the seed, as he always did, and waited for fear to drive the guilty to betray themselves. In the corridor outside, the storm slackened. The first sound of distant laborers digging toward the train reached their ears. Rescue approached. Time grew short. Poirot folded the incriminating letter with care and tucked it into his breast pocket. His eyes glittered as he looked upon them all. Now, my friends, he said softly, the end begins. The storm had begun to loosen its grip on the landscape. The train, however, remained immobile, a black serpent half buried in the snow, its passengers prisoners to both circumstance and suspicion. Dawn, pale and merciless, spilled through the frosted windows of the salon, bathing the assembled faces in a cold, grey light. The night had been long, the revelations longer still, and yet Hercule Poirot sat with an air of serenity, as if he were merely waiting for the next move in a game of chess he had already foreseen. Dr. Vogel had withdrawn into a rigid silence after the discovery of the incriminating papers. His jaw was clenched, his hands folded too tightly, the knuckles pale. Suspicion weighed upon him like an iron cloak. Lady Margaret sat stiffly, her eyes darting toward him with a mixture of fascination and dread. Dubois hunched forward, gnawing at his fingernails, while Colonel Harrington stood as though on guard duty, glaring at the doctor with open hostility. Madame Celeste remained inscrutable, her gaze cool, her manner composed, the faint perfume of violets lingering near her seat. Poirot broke the silence with his delicate, almost apologetic voice. You see, my friends, how swiftly suspicion alters its course. At midnight, it was the colonel who bore its weight. Now it is the doctor. Tomorrow, who knows? But the truth, it does not leap about so easily. It has roots. The colonel barked, roots or no roots, Vogel has the strongest motive. His name's in those blasted documents. Bellamy had the means to ruin him. What stronger reason could a man need? Reason, yes, Poirot said, but let us not forget. Opportunity is equally important, and opportunity it is most curious here. Tell me, Doctor, where were you at the precise moment of Bellamy's death? Vogel raised his head slowly. In my compartment, writing a case note. I told you this already. Indeed, Poirot murmured. And yet, there is one thing. You pride yourself on punctuality, on order. Your notes, they are always exact, written at the same time each night. Is it not so? Yes, Vogel admitted reluctantly. I keep such discipline. Poirot's mustache twitched. But last night, the scream came at midnight. Would you, a man of such precision, not have been already writing at 11, not at 12? And yet you said, at midnight, you were beginning. A small inconsistency, perhaps. But inconsistency, as I've told you, betrays more than guilt itself. Vogel flushed, his voice sharp. You twist my words. I was restless. I delayed. That is all. Perhaps. Poirot let the word hang, then turned to the others. But consider, if Vogel killed Bellamy to suppress a scandal, why kill Georges as well? Georges was but a waiter. He could not publish documents, unless, his eyes glittered, unless Georges saw him place the note in Bellamy's hand, and for that knowledge, he died. The colonel slammed his fist on the table. There, you have it. Case closed. Poirot sighed as if addressing a stubborn child. Mon colonel, if it were so simple, you would not need Hercule Poirot. But I tell you this, when a crime appears too clear, too neat, beware. It may be the cleverest deception of all. He rose suddenly, pacing the salon with his small, precise steps. His eyes moved from face to face, weighing, probing, unraveling. You see, Bellamy was not a man to inspire love. He collected secrets, he profited from ruin, he dangled information like bait upon a hook. He sought to sell his knowledge to Madame Celeste, perhaps to others as well, but he underestimated the danger. Secrets, when exposed, do not merely humiliate. They destroy, and destruction breeds murder. Lady Margaret's voice trembled. Then, who else among us might he have threatened? Poirot stopped, turned his gaze upon her. An excellent question, madame. Who else, indeed? Did he perhaps know of your late husband's dealings? Did he intend to use your name to extract money? She blanched, her handkerchief twisting in her lap. I will not be slandered. Poirot bowed slightly. I do not slander. I inquire. There is a difference. A man like Bellamy spreads his nets wide. It would be strange if he caught only one fish. Dubois gave a nervous laugh. But why should he concern himself with me? I have nothing, no fortune, no secrets worth buying. Poirot turned on him sharply. And yet you sketch always. You see more than you should. What if Bellamy realized that? What if you recorded something dangerous, even without knowing? Dubois' face drained of color. I never... He broke off, clutching his sketchbook to his chest as if it might betray him. Poirot resumed his seat, satisfied with the seeds of unease he had sown. You see, messieurs, dames, each of you may have had reason to fear Bellamy. That is why we must look beyond motive alone. We must look at behavior. He folded his hands. Consider, the colonel is too eager to fix blame. Lady Margaret trembles, yet answers quickly. Dubois hides behind his sketchbook. Madame Celeste is too calm, the doctor too precise. Each reveals something, and yet only one reveals too much. He let the silence stretch, heavy and unbearable. Then he smiled faintly. I will tell you what I believe. Bellamy's death, it was not the act of rage. It was the act of calculation, planned, deliberate, cold. And Georges' death, that was not planned. That was panic. Two different states of mind, two different choices. But one hand, one brain. The colonel frowned. Meaning what? Meaning, Poirot said softly, that we must find the contradiction between calculation and panic. The one who is calm in every answer, yet acted rashly when threatened. The one who wears serenity like a mask. His eyes slid once more to Madame Celeste. For the first time she faltered. Her lips pressed together, her gaze flickered. Poirot saw it at once. "Ah," he said gently. "You do not tremble, madame. But Georges saw you, did he not? He saw you leave Bellamy's compartment, and so you silenced him." Celeste rose suddenly, her voice sharp as a blade. "You go too far, monsieur." Poirot rose as well, bowing slightly. "Not far enough, not yet, for you are clever, madame. You cloak yourself in dignity, in charm. You admit to speaking with Bellamy, but you say only that he wished to sell you secrets. Perhaps it is true, perhaps it is not. But Georges... Georges saw, and now Georges lies dead." The room erupted. Lady Margaret gasped. Dubois muttered in disbelief. The colonel swore violently. Dr. Vogel, forgotten for a moment, exhaled heavily, his shoulders sagging as though a burden had been lifted. Poirot raised his hands for quiet. "I do not yet accuse. I only reveal what is hidden. But know this. The murderer cannot remain concealed much longer. The snow clears. The police approach, and before they arrive, the guilty will betray themselves. It is inevitable." Madame Celeste stood rigid, her face pale, her hands clenched at her sides. But she said nothing. Poirot sat again, serene. "Now, my friends, I suggest you rest, if rest is possible. The day will bring truth, and truth, she is a mistress who does not tolerate delay." The group dispersed slowly, each retreating to their compartments with heavy steps, each carrying suspicion in their hearts. Poirot remained behind, gazing at the scraps of paper on the table. Midden, and he saw. He turned them over in his hands, thoughtful. "The psychology," he murmured to himself. "Always, it is the psychology, and psychology never lies." The train creaked. Outside, men's voices echoed faintly, distant but drawing nearer. The snow would soon give way, and with it, the last refuge of the murderer. Poirot closed his eyes, his mustache curling in the faintest of smiles. The endgame had begun. The morning deepened into a brittle, silvery light that glittered on the crusted snow piled high against the train. Somewhere outside, the faint clang of shovels and shouted orders signaled that the relief crews were working to free the line. Rescue was coming. Yet within the salon of the Orient Express, the atmosphere was more tense than it had been all through the night. The promise of freedom brought not comfort, but dread. For when the police arrived, explanations would be demanded. If Poirot had not already unmasked the killer, they would seize upon the nearest suspect, and that suspect might not be the guilty one. The passengers had reassembled at Poirot's quiet request. They looked worn, bruised by fatigue, their nerves stretched thin. Lady Margaret's eyes were shadowed. She clutched her handkerchief as though it were a rosary. Dubois had ink on his fingertips, nervous stains from pages he had scribbled upon and torn away in the privacy of his compartment. Dr. Vogel sat stiff and brittle, like a man forced into stillness to prevent a collapse. Colonel Harrington's mustache drooped despite his belligerent stance, and Madame Celeste, impeccably dressed once more, her fur collar resting about her shoulders, looked serene, too serene. Poirot did not begin at once. He let the silence coil around them until the creak of the train and the beat of their hearts filled the air. Then, with a soft clearing of his throat, he spoke. "My friend, we have traversed the night together. We have seen one man struck down by the knife and another strangled by the hand. We have watched suspicion turn like a weather vane. But now we must find the wind itself, and for that we return to the beginning." He placed the 2 scraps of paper once more upon the table. "The dying messages. Midden, and he saw. These are the keys. But as I said, one may be false. Which? Let us examine. He picked up Bellamy's fragment. This, the letters MTMIDN-. I have looked at it closely, with the eyes not only of a detective, but of a man who has spent a lifetime observing handwriting. And I tell you this, these letters are not Bellamy's. In his valise, I examined his signatures, his notations. He wrote with a heavy, deliberate hand, with rounded strokes. But here, these letters are slanted, sharp, written in haste, yes, but not with his character. They are the writing of another. This, mes amis, is the work of the murderer. Gasps met his words. Dubois leaned forward, fascinated, while Lady Margaret murmured a prayer. Poirot set the fragment down. So, the dying message is no message at all. It is a trick, a piece of theatre. The murderer forced it into the victim's hand, that we might chase the wrong hare. And many of you did. His eyes twinkled briefly, though his tone remained grave. It pointed to midnight, to an appointment, to suspicion of those who walked the corridor then. It led us astray. But Georges left us the truth. He lifted the second scrap. He saw. Crude, unfinished, desperate. But here the handwriting is Georges' own. The strokes match those in the waiter's ledger, where he signed each receipt of service. He began to write the identity of the murderer. He was stopped before he could finish. Yet even these two words are more valuable than a dozen letters spelled out, because they tell us that he, poor Georges, recognized the killer. He saw them. The colonel barked. Then why in God's name didn't he write the name? Poirot's mustache twitched. Because he had only a moment, and because he thought he might cry out or resist or escape. But he did not. Still, his fragment is enough. For he saw. And I, Hercule Poirot, I must ask myself, who among us was known to Georges? Whose face, whose manner he would have recognized instantly without hesitation? Not an unknown passenger, no, but one who had already spoken to him, passed notes through his hand, perhaps. His gaze turned, inexorable, to Madame Celeste. Her lips curved faintly. Again, monsieur, you fix upon me. Poirot bowed. Oui, madame. Because Georges carried your tray, yes? Because Georges knew your perfume, yes? Because Georges saw you speak with Bellamy, and when you left his compartment, Georges may have glimpsed you. He knew it was you. That is why he died. For a moment, the salon was hushed, all eyes locked on Celeste. Her poise wavered just slightly. A tremor passed over her hand as she adjusted the fur at her throat. But Poirot was not finished. His voice sharpened, quiet but cutting. And yet, if Georges saw you, why did he not simply write your name? Why not Celeste? He could have begun so, but he did not. He wrote only, he saw. Why? Because the murderer was not a woman. The murderer was a man. The shock was palpable. Lady Margaret gasped aloud. The colonel blinked, stunned. Dubois' mouth dropped open, and even Dr. Vogel flinched. Celeste's eyes narrowed, dark as obsidian. Poirot continued, relentless. The perfume in Bellamy's compartment. It was not Madame's. It was taken from her, used to mislead. The violets were a mask. The murderer wanted us to suspect her, to chase her shadow, just as he wanted us to believe in Bellamy's so-called dying message. Two false clues, both too neat, both too deliberate. This is the psychology of misdirection. But psychology betrays itself. The guilty man, he overcompensates. He turned suddenly, his gaze pinning Dubois. Monsieur l'artiste, you see you draw. You pretend innocence, but you draw too much. You admitted sketching Bellamy's hands, but I looked again at your sketchbook. The page of the woman in fur, there is more there. You erased lines, rubbed them out, but faint traces remain. And those traces, they show not only a woman's collar, but also the outline of a man leaning close. A tall man with broad shoulders. A soldier's frame, perhaps. The colonel flushed. You mean me? Poirot raised a hand. Patience. Perhaps you, perhaps not. But this proves the artist saw more than he confessed, and why would he hide it, unless he feared what it revealed? Dubois stammered. I thought it was nothing, only a blur of movement. I did not wish to accuse. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Or did you not wish to accuse yourself? Because you, monsieur, are nervous, evasive. You clutch your sketchbook like a drowning man a plank. And tell me, why at midnight did you say you mistook the scream for a mouse? Who thinks of mice at such an hour, unless to invent? Dubois' face blanched. I swear. Poirot cut him off. Enough. The truth comes nearer. The guilty man is clever, yes, but not too clever. He lays false trails. He plays with perfume, with scraps of paper, with sketches half erased. He panics when seen, and so he kills Georges. He calculates, then he blunders. It is this mixture, coldness and rashness, that betrays him. He leaned back, folding his arms. Soon the snow will part. The police will board. Before they do, I shall call you all once more together. And in that gathering, I will speak the name. Until then, I warn you, beware of the guilty. For a cornered murderer, he may strike again. The salon was deathly quiet. Dubois trembled. Lady Margaret dabbed at her eyes. The colonel muttered furiously, and Celeste sat like a statue. Dr. Vogel stared at Poirot with an expression half relieved, half terrified. Poirot glanced at the window. The sound of shovels was closer now, men's voices clearer. Soon the train would move. Soon the game would end. He smiled faintly, his mustache curling upward. The little grey cells, they have spoken. The rest, my friends, is but theatre. And Hercule Poirot, he always enjoys the final act. The morning light glared through the frost, casting every wrinkle, every flicker of guilt into harsh relief. Outside, rescue approached. Inside, doom waited for one among them. The snow-ploughs had cut a path by noon, their engines groaning against the drifts, and a cheer had gone up from the labourers outside. Relief, salvation, the train would soon move again. Yet within the salon, no cheer arose. The passengers sat as if spellbound, drawn together by invisible cords of fear and expectation. For Poirot had summoned them with a quiet command, and when Poirot summoned, it was not to offer comfort. He stood before them, small and impeccable, the neat lines of his suit unrumpled despite the long night. His mustache gleamed, his eyes burned with the calm fire of certainty. He glanced once toward the window, where daylight glared upon snowbanks like white stone. Then he turned back, clasping his hands. Mesdames et messieurs, he began softly, it is time. Time to finish our little voyage together. The police, they will soon arrive. But before they step upon this train, Hercule Poirot will tell you the truth. There will be no mistake. There will be no innocent man dragged away while the guilty smiles in shadow. Non, non. The truth will shine as clear as the snow outside. He paced a step, then another, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. Consider the facts. Monsieur Bellamy is found dead at midnight, stabbed with a narrow blade. In his hand is a scrap of paper with the letters M-I-D-N. Too neat, too theatrical. Not his writing, a false clue planted by the murderer. Then poor Georges is found strangled. In his hand is another scrap. He saw, this time genuine. He began to tell us whom he saw. He was stopped. He raised a finger. 2 clues, one false, one true. Already the psychology is clear. The murderer is clever enough to invent, but careless enough to panic. He stages a message, he sprinkles perfume to mislead, but when seen by Georges, he strangles. Calculation and rashness, together. That is the mind we seek. He turned, looking at each face. Lady Margaret, she trembles, she fears. But fear is not guilt. She has no strength for violence. Dr. Vogel, he is implicated in Bellamy's papers. Yes, But his precision, his rigidity, they are too visible, too clumsy. He is an excellent suspect, but a false one. Colonel Harrington, he was in the corridor. Too convenient, too obvious. He is a soldier, but he blusters too much, and bluster is the shield of the falsely accused. Madame Celeste, ah, Madame, you were framed by the violets. The perfume, it was borrowed from you, placed in Bellamy's compartment, and you were clever enough to endure the suspicion calmly. But calmness is not guilt. It is innocence with dignity. He stopped, his eyes fastening upon the last. Monsieur Jacques Dubois, the young artist, the nervous hands, the erased sketches, the foolish story of a mouse. You saw more than you admitted. You drew Bellamy speaking with another. You concealed it. And why? Because you yourself were that other. You visited him at midnight. You argued. You killed him. A cry broke from Lady Margaret. The colonel swore aloud. Dubois shrank back, white as chalk. Poirot pressed on, inexorable. Bellamy dealt in secrets. He had discovered yours, did he not? The young artist with debts in Paris, with forgery whispered at his back. Bellamy knew. He meant to sell this secret, to ruin you unless you paid. You had no money. You had only desperation, and desperation, it can drive a man to murder. Dubois stammered, "No, Poirot's voice cut through, merciless now. The knife, it was narrow, quick. An artist's hand knows precision. You thrust, you planted the paper, you left the perfume as bait. But Georges, poor Georges, saw you leave. He knew. And so you strangled him, clumsy, brutal. That is the contradiction that betrayed you, monsieur. A precise killer one moment, a panicked animal the next. The psychology, it fits you alone." Silence reigned, heavy, suffocating. Dubois' sketchbook slipped from his hands, falling open upon the floor. There, half erased but visible in the harsh light, was the faint outline of Bellamy's face, leaning forward in agitation, and opposite him, sketched in sharper lines, the unmistakable profile of Dubois himself. A strangled sob tore from his throat. He buried his face in his hands. He would have destroyed me. My work, my life. It would have been over. I only wanted him to be silent, and Georges would have betrayed me too. I had no choice. Poirot's gaze was cold. There is always a choice, monsieur. Always. Two attendants from the crew moved forward, seizing Dubois by the arms. He offered no resistance, sagging between them like a marionette with cut strings. Poirot turned back to the others, his expression grave but serene. "You see, my friends, the little grey cells, they reveal all, the false clues, the contradictions, the psychology. It is never the grand gesture, never the dagger or the scream that solves the crime. It is the small detail, the line erased too carefully, the story told too quickly. In these, the truth lives." The train shuddered as the engines roared to life. Outside, the path lay open at last. The Orient Express would continue on its journey. Poirot adjusted his cufflinks with immaculate precision. He looked once more at the frightened faces, now relieved, yet chastened. And so, justice travels with us, even through snow. Remember this. Order, it is always disturbed by murder. And Hercule Poirot, he restores it. He bowed slightly, and with perfect composure, returned to his compartment, leaving behind the echo of certainty and the knowledge that nothing, not snow, nor night, nor deception, could obscure the light of truth from Hercule Poirot.